up, my channel? It's your friendly neighborhood sassy blonde writer coming at you with another writing video. So today I'm going to be talking to you about not novel writing for once, but I'm going to be talking about screenplays, radio plays, and scripts. The interesting thing about them is that they are all really similar. Like, they vary different from genre, like in formatting and whatnot. However, overall, the way they're different from writing a novel is essentially the same. Fun fact, April used to be the screenplay version of Writing NaNoWriMo called Script Friendly. Sadly, it isn't a formal thing because of funding. But when I heard of it, I thought that was a really cool idea. I wanted to do some videos about script writing 101. What's also interesting is writing scripts is also how you write a comic book, which I'm learning because I myself am writing a comic book right now. So I'm not talking about this in April because April's now National Poetry Writing Month, but I still wanted to talk about it. So you're probably wondering why I, somebody who's mainly focused on writing books like novels and short stories and children's books and such, am making a video about writing scripts and plays. Well, it all started with when a friend of mine and I tried to write a video play for our podcast, Austin and the A Train. Life happened and we didn't get to finish said screenplay, but it did get the ball rolling in my noggin on all of that fun stuff. So I tried to make a vlog for it, but So then I made a video about underwriting, which is something that I'm guilty of, and the two things kind of meshed together in my mind. So I'm a reading and writing teacher, and in the past I've suggested to students who don't like writing stories to try writing scripts for like a comic book or for a movie instead. The reason why is because it is something really helpful for developing clarity in your writing. You don't really have to think about it because you're not going to write flowery descriptions or use luscious metaphors a lot because you're trying to write how people talk generally. So you're trying to still hit character voice, characterization, and all that fun stuff. Writing descriptions of places is more like matter of fact and like bare bones, like whatever you need to communicate to the other person so they know how to film it or stage it or whatever, or perform it. But you're not writing descriptions for somebody to necessarily read and get a picture in their mind. You're trying to be more direct than that. The writing is just very functional when you're writing a script, screenplay, or a radio play. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to keep saying scripts because what I'm going to talk about in this video specifically applies to all of those things. So yes, the descriptions are more functional. It's instead of rage was bursting through Susie like a volcano as she sauntered off from where her brother stood. The description in the script would be Susie walked around the stage very annoyed at her brother. And so you're trying to write things so that way they're direct enough so that way people get them, whoever's reading it can perform it correctly. But you also want to keep it vague enough so that way there's kind of room for interpretation. That's the fun part of being an actor, is kind of putting your own spin on someone else's words. So you don't necessarily, I mean, there are people who do, but you don't want to necessarily like dictate specifically what people want to do. It doesn't have to be very descriptive, but it does have to give the reader, who is an actor, an animator, a director, enough information to know what the writer wants. So now let's talk about how scripts are different from novels. So screenplays, radio plays, and scripts of all kinds follow a similar format, and they are pretty different from writing novels. For one thing, they're drastically shorter. I talked about that in my books versus movies video. They're very dialogue heavy. If you find yourself trying to write any type of prose, like a book or a short story, and it ends up being very dialogue heavy, you might actually really enjoy writing a screenplay or a script over writing a novel because you can kind of stick with your strengths. And the descriptions tend to be very bare bones style of writing. If you are an underwriter and when you're trying to write novels or you struggle with creating realistic dialogue, this might be worth a try for you to develop those skills and play around with a different medium. It's also very good for underwriters because at the end of the day, the audience is not going to see the elaborate descriptions that you are writing. You want to keep your descriptions as clear and concise as possible for the actors, directors, and whoever else ends up working on it. Any purple prose or flowery language descriptions would be wasted because only like a group of like maybe 100 people if you're working on a movie, maybe a group of like 10 people if you're working on a play are going to be reading it. Speaking an actor and former theater kid. So they want you to get to the point as soon as possible. So if you're an underwriter, that's probably a strength of yours. So writing in this style would really help you because you get to work on clarity in your language as well, which can sometimes get lost when you're trying to write a book and you have everybody telling you, show, don't tell, blah, 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 blah. If you want to develop your writing skills, your dialogue, specifically for dialogue, this can be helpful too. You just write dialogue without really having to worry about anything else. When I was a kiddo, I actually wrote like Gilmore Girls fan fiction. I didn't even realize it because I was just writing like a little script as a play and just used dialogue. It was so easy and fun, and I put my talent for good dialogue to use. This is not an in-depth video on writing a script for a professional on a professional level because that's just not what I do. There are plenty of other resources that can help you with the formal language and formatting. But this is a video on kind of the beginner's guide to writing a script. I actually asked a writer group that I'm in on Facebook. I forget what the name of the group was, but I just asked for some tips on writing or at the time it was a radio play, because I had written scripts before. I had to write one in college as like an extra credit assignment, and it was a lot of fun. It was basically like a continuation of like the Glass Menagerie, where I had to imagine what it was like when the main character came back to his family and like saw what happened. So I know how to write a script, and also if you read enough of them, you kind of pick up how they usually go. The setting is usually italicized. Then you have character name, sometimes parentheses, and how they say it, words. Then you have stage directions, again italicized or in parentheses. And then you have what the other character does, parentheses, how they say it, if you want to do that, and then dialogue, and then, yeah. So generally that is like your basic, like bare bones description of what a script is. Again, I've only ever done that. I haven't done this in a professional like screenplay writing capacity, although I did help on a script once with the cult classic Triceratops, and I will link to it down below if you are interested in watching my fabulous content. So I asked this writer group for help, and I would like to thank Rachel Bateman, who gave me some of these tips. So your number one rule for writing a script is keep it simple. So you don't write internal dialogue unless it's going to be like and if you do write internal dialogue, it's going to be said in a voiceover. It's not your job to figure out what the character's inner monologue is, it's the actors. You don't have to talk about inner dialogue, introspection, or emotions. If you can't see it on screen, don't put it in the screenplay. As the writer, there are certain things that are just not your job. For screenplays, don't write in camera angles, pan, zoom, or music cues. That's the director and the music department's job. That's really not yours, unless you have specifics in mind. If you have specifics in mind, go ahead. Like, she's shocked, zoom in on her face. Unless it's a really big deal for you, you don't necessarily have to put in the music cues or anything like that. Your main job as the screenplay writer is to write about the action and write about the dialogue. For plays as well, a lot of times, like, the stage manager or the assistant to the director is going to be the one writing down these stage directions. If you decide to put in stage directions like, oh, they cross over to the table, that's fine, but like you don't have to worry like, oh, and then they enter stage left and exit stage right. In this class, we were doing a lot of play watching. First, we would read the play and then we watch the play. And so it was really interesting to kind of get the feel of how it goes from the page to the stage. And now it's time for other tips that I got from a person who actually wrote screenplays before they turned to novel writing, Rachel Bateman. So her tips were, number one, spend a day learning the formatting. There are tons of resources online that teach screenplay format. There's also tons of master classes, BBC Maestro courses. I'm sure Squarespace also has courses as well. It's not difficult, but it is precise in language. So if you prefer a book, your cut to is showing is super comprehensive. There are also multiple books on the subject. So the best way to also get a really solid understanding for screenplay format, including like the balance between dialogue and action and how much white space to expect on the page, is to download several screenplays for your genre and read them, study them, get to know them inside out. This is actually easier than you think because, unlike plays, screenplays are readily available for free. I mean, think about it. You're not going to do an unlicensed revival of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Personally, when I was first trying to learn about this because I had an idea for a TV show, I downloaded a ton of them. I think Scribd has a bunch of them. SCRIBD. I'll link to it down below. I have no idea if I just got that right. I also highly recommend, if you have a specific genre in mind, if you're not just like trying to learn about screenplay writing and you have a specific, like a rom-com idea or a TV show pilot idea that you want to pitch to someone, I recommend looking at scripts that are specifically in that genre. So like I wanted to write a comedy show pilot, and so there I found Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I found Scrubs. Also, some of the best pilots out there are The Sopranos, the Cheers pilot. Those, you want to look at good classic examples like that, but you also want to look at genre specific ones. You wouldn't start writing a sci-fi novel having never picked up a sci-fi book. The next tip that she gave me was simplify. And this is simplify what's on the page, like don't write internal dialogue, introspection, emotions, blah, 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 blah. Of course, there are exceptions, like when it comes to voice and tone of the screenplay, but like, it's one of those rules where it's like, follow it until you know how to break it. And also simplify, don't complicate your plot. As I said in my books and movies video bajillion years ago, movies are shorter than books. Don't overcomplicate your plot. There's generally enough time to get through like one main plot and one side plot. If you watch a movie and there's 3 plots going on, pacing often is an issue. This is one of my favorite tips that she gave me, which is the rule that she refers to it as the rule of 3-3-3. So something needs to happen about every 3 pages. No scene should be longer than 3 pages, and all dialogue and action should be kept to like 3 lines or less. So this is a guideline, not a rule, and a lot of people break it. Like, she even admitted that she breaks it constantly. But it's a good thing to keep in mind. I personally like to apply that to when I'm writing regular prose as well. It's just a good rule of thumb because screenplays, even for slower movies, tend to move at a faster clip than many novels. So it helps you avoid the meandering and dragging scenes. In a movie, something needs to be going on. You know, like a novel, you pick it up and you can put it down. So, you know, you don't always have to have something going on, and you can allow for more introspection and emotional depth and like exploration and inner monologues in a novel. So something is always happening in a novel, but it's not visual. The last tip she gave me was use a screenwriting software. Sure, you can muddle through in Word. Scrivener has a screenplay mode. It's okay, if I'm being honest. If you have Scrivener and you're just kind of dipping your toes into the screenplay writing pool, I would recommend using Scrivener. Plays scripts and like comic book scripts tend to be more flexible, so you could muddle through that in Word if you really wanted to. If you are really serious, you really want to start screenplay writing, then you should get the tool for what you're doing. You know, you wouldn't start hanging up pictures without at least a hammer. And so you don't necessarily have to pay for something like Final Draft. There are plenty of free versions. The examples she gave me were Fade In, Write a Duet, and Trilby? I guess that's how you say it. That's all I have for you today, folks, on screenplays, radio plays, and scripts. I really like doing these videos on Baby Tries to Write a Screenplay, or like these like little helpful tips and tricks for branching out into your genre, for branching out of your writer's comfort zone for the first time. So if you want more videos like this, please let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, and of course, happy writing.